what was up in the air.
That's right. So we want to let you know that we're getting this word as we just came on the air. And as you know, the judge forbid cameras in the courtroom down there. And it's looking like possibly guilty on tampering with physical evidence. So our reporters are in the courtroom, but they're having to come out of the courtroom and feed this information. And I'm getting it through text message from our photographers on the air there. Shay McAllister just now texting me, guilty on both conspiracy and tampering. And they're doing the sentencing right now, Connie. They are hearing the testimony. This is moving fast. Shay is right there in the courtroom outside being able to get it. She's not going to be out of there for a minute. But again, let's once again go over this because it's just coming in. Guilty on both conspiracy to commit murder and tampering. As you pointed out, the tampering charge there was easy for the jury.
Right, because the defense admitted that Steve Lawson, tampered with the evidence in the case. And so not a big surprise, but some thought maybe after he took the stand today that maybe the jurors would believe that he was not guilty of conspiracy. Maybe he could prove his case, but apparently that didn't happen.
That didn't happen. Nick Mudd, come on in here. He just walked in. He's walking in the door as we speak. Our legal analyst who called it. I've got your microphone. You're sitting right over here, Nick. And he called it. He said that Steve Lawson would testify, and that's the first thing that happened. So we want to get your, if you want to boost your seat up there, this is just happening live television here as we're getting the verdict in, coming in from the courtroom down in Bowling Green. So Nick, I'll give you that microphone. Give us your reaction here to the guilty charge on both conspiracy and tampering. They're doing the sentencing right now.
Obviously they thought that he was involved. Taking the stand was obviously a risk, but I think it was kind of a Hail Mary at that point. I talked to multiple lawyers last night who thought I was crazy at first too when I said, hey, I would put him on the stand. But then they said, look, at this point, everything points to a conviction on both charges. If you're starting at 0, what do you have to lose?
Right. Let me ask you this. So today on the stand, Steve Lawson said that he didn't know who killed Crystal Rogers or if she was even dead. And that, when I heard that, I thought, I don't know. If I'm a member of the jury, to me, that seems like you might be lying if you said that, because I think pretty much everybody knows that Crystal Rogers has passed.
Right. I think that quote for him was just bad. I mean, bad all around. I had the same reaction. I heard that.
Well, then was it a mistake to put Lawson up there? I mean, you said it was a roll of the dice, and because he might have a personality that connects with the jury. We don't really know. We've never heard him speak.
But I think at that point, because the proof was so overwhelming, he was likely to get convicted. You got to do something as a lawyer. I mean, it's your Hail Mary pass to say, look, I got one shot. Maybe they believe you. Maybe they think that you were used by Brooks House. But that quote was very bad for him. I heard he did pretty well on the stand, but that quote in particular was it's kind of those, once it's said, you can't pull it back, and his lawyers are probably sitting there going,
I want to bring in an exclusive interview that Shay got. One of the alternate jurors, remember there were 15 jurors, 10 women, and the breakup was, what was the exact breakup? Do you all remember?
Was it 10 women and 5 men?
Yes, 10 women and 5 men. One man was excused early today. We want to play the exchange as Shay was able to catch up with him as he left the courtroom. Here it is.
Can you just give me your read on the case? When you were going to be walking in, what were you going to say in deliberations?
I don't know. I didn't get that far.
Didn't even get to think about it?
No, not really.
Did you believe Mr. Lawson's story?
That wasn't really a question of the case.
Do you think he had anything to do with the planning of the murder of Crystal Rogers?
I don't know.
What about the car? Do you think he moved the car?
Yeah. Well, he helped.
He helped move the car?
Yeah.
But you're not sure if he was part of a larger conspiracy?
No, I'm not sure. I think only the jury can
make that call. What about this case? Had you heard about it before?
No.
You had not heard a single thing?
No, my wife had, but, I had never, I knew her name, I've seen the billboard, but I didn't know about the case. I didn't know it was here.
You never heard anything? So you were truly hearing evidence for the very first time?
Yeah. I'm not big into, the crime. true crime stuff. So
And it sounds like you followed instructions because you really hadn't made up your mind.
no, I hadn't. You know, I thought I had. You know, I would think that I had, and then yeah, I don't know.
Was there anything, any moment that might have changed your mind when you thought you knew something? You said you thought you might have made up your mind, but then something stood out and changed your mind.
Well, I mean, we went through the whole trial without knowing the instructions. You know, once we were read the instructions, you know, the way that the law reads kind of changes like what we're trying to decide. So, no, I didn't have a clear opinion one way or the other.
Are you interested to see what the jury decides?
Yeah, I'd be curious to see.
And will you be paying attention when Brooks Houck goes to trial next month?
Probably not.
This will be the end of your interest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what an interview. That was done at about 1:30, between 1:30 and 2 this afternoon as they were getting ready to go into the lunch. Your impression on what he had to say there?
You know, you never know, because I have literally had an alternate come out and say, not guilty before, and then the jury convicts my client.
Right,
so,
right.
you know, you never know what goes in that jury room, and you never know if 11 people went in there not guilty and you get one strong person and they convince everybody else. It happens.
Well, and when you listen to this man that she talked to, the juror who was dismissed, it certainly sounded like he wasn't so sure about the conspiracy charge. Right. So it's kind of surprising that they you know, if he was thinking the way they were, I guess he wasn't, because you certainly would think, well, maybe they're not going to convict on the conspiracy charge the way he was talking.
Yeah, when I heard that before, I had read that earlier about the interview with him, and I thought, oh, I mean, I think it was his view of it was reasonable based on the proof we heard. I thought, well, maybe they got a shot here, but you know, again, you get in there and the jury. I've never been in one, but I'm just going from experience, you know, talking to jurors after.
Right.
You never know what happens in there, and a lot of times people forget what happened, right? We knew Wednesday, the prosecution had a huge day, right? So big, or maybe part of, you know.
That's when you said your opinion changed.
Right.
With the prosecution. Did the defense attorney do a bad job in this case?
Absolutely not. You can only go with what you're given, right? I mean, you can't make the facts up. You can be the best, you can be Johnny Cochran or F.E. Bailey, and at the end of the day, the facts are the facts are the facts. And the prosecution did a good job. As we talked about, what did I say on Wednesday? The prosecution is climbing that mountain.
Well, let's talk about the ease of this case. I mean, we're talking, what, a 4-day trial. They deliberated for just a few hours in the end. And we don't have the exact count yet, but it wasn't very long. It was right after lunch that they've come out with this verdict. And it was pretty much across the board what a lot of us had predicted this week.
I think, though, throughout the week, what have we seen? Two things. Number one, Stephen Lawson was a liar based on what was presented. And number two, I think the question is, why did you lie repeatedly again and again and again and again? I mean, I don't know how many times you lied, but you know, it was a lot. And why are you lying? What are you lying about? Why didn't you just come out and say that from the beginning?
Right, and then again today on the stand, you kind of thought, oh, well, maybe the jury will think that he's telling the truth, because first he was talking about, I made up that, you know, when we had that phone call and I said it was about the apartment. I said that not to protect Brooks Houck. I said it to protect my son.
Right.
And so you might think, oh, the jurors might think, okay, maybe he's telling the truth here. But then again, coming back to those statements, I don't know if Crystal Rogers is alive or not. And and what he said there, it kind of then like, I don't know if they're going to believe that.
Almost flippant, you know what I mean?
Right.
If you read the statement, and that's one of those statements that it's so bad that it doesn't matter the context or the demeanor when you said it.
Yeah.
It's almost like, ooh.
So here's our coverage. We want to, if you're just joining us, we're bringing you special report coverage. Let's show everybody what has just happened. The verdict is in Bowling Green after the 4-day trial for Steve Lawson. Of course, this is trial number 1. Trial number 2 is coming starting on June 24th. Guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty on tampering with physical evidence. Our reporters are still in there listening to the sentencing now, and we'll be joined live by Shay McAllister in just a moment. Again, the judge forbid cameras in the courtroom right before this trial began. That's going to happen with the next trial, which will be Joseph Lawson, Steve Lawson's son, and Brooks Houck, who is, of course, charged with murder in this case. Let's talk about the prison time here. Nick, how do you see this playing out for Lawson?
You know, it's the jury's got pretty wide latitude here, okay? And what I mean by that, the base minimum here is 10 years. Okay, if they gave him the conspiracy to commit murder is a 10 to 20 year prison sentence, the tampering with evidence is a 1 to 5 years. They can give him 10 on one and 1 to 5 on the tampering, and they can do what's called run it concurrent. Concurrent means they run it together. Means they, if it's 15 years, they run them together. The sentences run together. Or they could really, go hard here and run the sentences consecutive. That means they stack them up. So for instance, let's talk worst case scenario. Let's say, hey, the jury thought he was a liar. They thought he was very involved and they did not like him at all. They could give him 20 years on the conspiracy charge plus 5 years on the tampering for a total of 25 years, which, murder in the state of Kentucky, murder itself, the charge is a 20 to 50 year or life sentence. So really, they could give him a sentence that's higher than a murder conviction on the base minimum.
Do you think that the jurors, like in the back of their mind, they would not possibly admit this, but they're, thinking, he knew about this for how many years since she's been missing, 10 years, and he didn't say a word, and that they might hold a little bit of that about wanting him to spend some time for the family going through all this hardship for 10 years?
Absolutely. Penalty. So you have in Kentucky, you have a guilt-innocence phase, and now if you're found guilty, you move on to what's called the penalty phase, and that's where they assign a penalty. And certainly, Connie, what you're talking about, they can take into account, and they don't just look at the crime, okay, what happened. They look at the whole person. And so this is the big risk of putting someone on the stand right here. If you do get convicted, if they think you're a liar, they don't like you, that's really where they can punish you.
We should say you called for it, though. If you were his attorney, you would have done it.
I would have done the exact same thing.
This verdict came in just about 10 minutes ago, and we want to bring you instant reaction. We want to go to our Alexandra Goldberg. She's been down in Bardstown all day long waiting for this verdict to come in, and let's join her now to get a report on how folks in Bardstown are viewing the end of trial number 1. Alexandra?
Connie, Doug, just minutes ago, we wrapped up an interview with a woman named Katie Marks. And just as she was walking away, the guilty verdict came in. She sent me a text. She said that she was relieved. She says today's guilty verdict for Steve Lawson is nothing short of a win. I pray that Sherry and the family feel stronger than ever amongst themselves and within this community to keep moving forward. Tommy's walk has continued on all these years, and finally there's some justice. This is a sentiment that we've heard all around town today. Take a listen. Well, we'll bring you the story in just a moment now, but one thing that we heard over and over today was that this is just part 1 of this 2-part trial, and they think that today's guilty verdict could lead them into a more significant trial for next month.
What's going on, man?
This is no typical Friday morning for Bardstown native Jimmy Gartland.
Just put 100 on it. How about that? Okay. And this week has been quite interesting. I mean, things are popping up left, right, and crooked.
He's been waiting for a verdict since 2015. This week, Steve Lawson, one of the 3 men charged in the disappearance of Crystal Rogers, tried in front of a jury in Bowling Green for conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with evidence.
If he gets convicted, guilty of all counts or whatever, and at least they're 1/3 there to getting it behind us.
Bombshells in the Warren County courtroom, taking those following the trial by surprise.
Phone calls from jail.
Evidence brought forward Thursday, recorded calls between Steve Lawson and his mother discussing Rogers' disappearance.
Why would you talk about it on a phone service that's going to be tapped?
Bardstown residents Roger and Bobby Markham agree.
Well, I was encouraged about the phone calls. I thought those were very incriminating from the jailhouse.
Residents looking ahead to next month when the alleged co-conspirators Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson take their turn in front of a jury. Houck is the only one charged with murder. Again, Houck is the only one charged with murder, as you just heard. Folks in Bardstown saying that today's trial will set up next month's trial with Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson. People all day today on the edge of their seat, feeling emotions of anxiety, also fatigue. This has been a decade-long process. We'll have the full story here at 5, live in Bardstown. Alexandra Goldberg, WHAS 11 on your side.
Alexander, very good. Thank you very much. Again, you're watching our special report coverage. The jury returning the verdict at right at the top of the hour as we were going on the air. Nick, can the prosecutors now offer Steve Lawson a deal to turn on the others in this case?
Absolutely. It's not uncommon when you get to the penalty phase they say, hey, if you'll waive your right to appeal, we'll give you basically the low end of the penalty, but we want you to testify. The problem here is that I don't even know at this point, given the lack of credibility Steve Lawson has, if the prosecution would want to call him as a witness, because really it can muddy up their own case.
Right, and there was a talk of giving him a deal before that was a big mess. So how does that play
now
into
he really may
another
want it.
deal?
Yeah, he may want a deal, but that doesn't mean he's going to get one. I mean, there's no binding on the prosecution at this point. And I would say Sheng Young, at this point, probably wouldn't even want to call him as a witness.
Well, the heavyweight charge in this, of course, is a conspiracy to commit murder. Where did it turn in this case? I mean, even in his testimony today, when he was on there, you know, he said that his son Joseph called him and the night saying he broke down on the Bluegrass Parkway and needed help. He admitted to pushing Crystal Rogers' car seat up. So he admitted his involvement in a lot of key points in this trial.
Right. I think you had three main issues here. Number one, you had a lot of people that were surrounding them that worked for Brooks Houck that talked about his knowledge, the involvement. Number two, you have him really lacking credibility with the number of inconsistent statements and lies that he gave to the grand jury. We heard on the phone calls, told other people. And the third thing was the jury today looked at his demeanor, and I can only assume thought that he was lying.
How does the guilty pleas or the guilty verdicts on both of these charges help the prosecution now going forward on their big fish, really, in this whole thing, Brooks Houck?
Well, it's not really admissible in that trial. You know, you can't say, hey, jury, in the next trial, we've got one of your co-defendants that he was found guilty, find these two, you know, find Brooks Houck and his son, and you know, Stephen Lawson's son guilty. However, I think it gives the prosecution a lot of steam, and certainly, who knows, maybe Houck and the Lawson son may be asking for a deal now.
So this could directly have an impact a month from now.
It could, absolutely. Could help settle those cases. You never know.
You know, Brooks Houck came up a lot in this case. You always said that they were going to try to push it off on him to make him more of the person, the focus of this instead of Steve Lawson. We don't know yet if it's going to work, but did you see the early beginnings of that in this trial?
I mean, I think there was a lot of cross-examination by the defense, you know, trying to distance themselves and saying, look, we know Brooks Houck did this. We're not a part of that, or all we did was follow orders. But in terms of the proof that's going to come from the prosecution, I'm expecting a lot more and a lengthier trial come 3 weeks from now when Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson are set for trial.
Are you still surprised by how quickly everything has gone?
I mean, the jury selection went way faster than I've had cases that took 2 days to get a jury pick, and it's been flying. Judge Sims kept this trial on track.
Steve Lawson on the stand today was fascinating. He talked about how Houck wanted Rogers gone and how he would like to talk to another man named Charlie Girdley, who we talked about here on the air a lot. Girdley testified earlier this week. And then he says this quote, Lawson says, "You've got some of the meanest people in the world working for you," he told Brooks Houck. And then he went and told Charlie that and laughed it off. But Lawson also said Houck never asked him directly to help kill Crystal Rogers.
Right. I mean, again,
is anyone going to believe him?
It was a Hail Mary to get up there. I still think it was probably the right call if I'm the defense lawyer. But given the proof after Wednesday's testimony, I mean, you're starting back 50 yards, and you got a whole lot of yards to make up if this were a football game. So you got to throw the long pass and hope for the best.
Well, and that statement that Doug just brought up that he made today in court shows that he knew something bad was going to happen to Crystal Rogers.
Right. And I mean, again,
the conspiracy.
You can prep your client months, days, weeks, hours, and spend with them. And at the end of the day, trial happens. You never know what they're going to say on the stand, unfortunately. And so, and it's for the jury to judge. And You know.
Well, another name, a person who's not even charged in this case, but who sort of is ever present, is Nick Houck,
right,
the brother of Brooks Houck, who was a former Bardstown police officer. And we want to bring you up to date on Nick Houck and why his name was brought up at least 4 times or more in this week-long trial.
Well, Nick, I've had a chance to review your charts on both tests. That first test, you did not pass the test.
That's Nick Houck during a police interrogation in 2015. The man questioning him is an FBI agent named Mike Schaefer. Mike took the stand in court today, telling jurors he asked Nick Houck if he was involved in the disappearance of Crystal Rogers. Nick denied it.
I'm telling you, no. Okay, I don't know anything about this.
Prosecutor Shane Young confirmed in court today Nick Houck has been named an unindicted co-conspirator in the case. He went on to call the death of Crystal Rogers a coordinated effort. Are you surprised?
I'm not surprised. I'm relieved. I'm relieved.
Rick McCubbin was police chief in Bardstown in 2015 when Rogers was reported missing. He said he had to force Nick to cooperate with police.
When I called him in and he wasn't cooperating, you know, I just got a weird feeling. You know, something's not right.
Days later, he fired him and told him he didn't deserve to be a police officer, something he stands by today.
One of the best things I've done as a police chief in 35 years. You know, I can't put a finger on it, but you get that feeling. I'm relieved I made the right call.
Still, so many questions about the evidence in the case. How, of the 3 suspects named and discussed, Nick Houck is the only one still walking free. Prosecutor Shane Young confirmed it in court again today, saying Nick has not been indicted. How can they say these kinds of things, but then not go and immediately make an arrest?
That's a good question we all have, but I understand it's completely up to the prosecutor at what point he's going to flip the switch and do that. Completely up to him, and they may already have a plan, and I'm sure they do.
A plan that could take shape in the days or weeks to come.
And now, just out of the courtroom, we want to join our Shay McAllister, who was there for the sentencing hearing. And Shay, trial number 1 is over. You have followed this so closely. What's running through your mind right here today?
I got to tell you, Doug, it was difficult being in there in the end because it was very emotional for both sides. As soon as the verdict was read, which as a reminder was guilty on conspiracy to commit murder, guilty on tampering with physical evidence, an entire row of the Ballard family doubled over sobbing. It was tough to watch. This is something they have waited almost 10 years for, and certainly the outcome that they were all hopeful for. Before we got in there for the verdict, they were pacing, just nervous, waiting to see what would happen. And the emotions actually ran even higher because now they're in the sentencing phase when the jurors will decide how much time he's facing. It could be as little as 10 years. It could be as much as 25 years. And during the sentencing phase, the Commonwealth was able to call additional witnesses, and they did. They called Crystal's daughter, Tori. She got on the stand. She's 21 years old. She told the jurors that next week she's going to be getting married. Her mom won't be there to help her get ready. They talked about, she said growing up without her mom was horrific, missing all of those major milestones. She was just 11 years old the last time she saw her mom. And I looked over at the jurors as Tori was wiping her eyes on the witness stand. Jurors were wiping their eyes as well, definitely feeling some sympathy for her. Tori did also say that she still holds out hope they're going to find her. She still thinks that is possible, and through all of this heartbreak, she holds on to that hope. After Tori, it was turned over to the defense. They called Barbara, Steve Lawson's mom, and she got up on the stand and said, you know, you see the best in your children, you believe the best in your children. That's what she has always done. She asked the jurors to do the right thing, to make a decision on sentencing that they can live with, one that they feel is right. And the jurors were nodding at her. So both sides here, a very difficult day for both of them, a lot of emotions in the courtroom. It's my understanding that here in a few minutes they will release the jurors back to their deliberation room to decide on how many years, and then they'll come back out and deliver that news like a verdict. So we'll have another break here, and at that time we'll be looking out to talk to some of the different attorneys and family members and spectators who are here today. Doug, Connie.
Shay, it's Connie here, and I'm wondering, you were in the courtroom today when Steve Lawson was on the stand. What do you think was the turning point for the jury in his statements today? Because you're able to see their reaction to things that he said and how he said them. What were your thoughts today on his testimony?
Well, I actually asked that exact question. I talked to one of the 3 jurors who was excused. Of course, 15 listened to the case, only 12 were in deliberations, and I asked him what was a turning point. He told me that it wasn't anything that was said, it was the judge's instructions, which is very interesting. I didn't see any visible reactions to anything that Steve Lawson said. He was very respectful of them, lots of yes ma'am, yes sir, and ladies and gentlemen, you'll understand. I know he was working hard just to humanize himself and seem personable and not, the liar and manipulator that the Commonwealth had described him as.
Can you tell us about the judge's instructions? Because in the end, they really didn't deliberate very long, it seems.
Exactly, yes. Okay, so the judge's instructions, excuse me while I flip my notes around, because at the last, at the end of this trial, we found out that the judge would be offering a second choice next to conspiracy. So when he read the different choices for the men and women of the jury, he said, you can find him guilty of conspiracy to commit murder if you believe that he knew Brooks Houck had a plan to kill Crystal Rogers and he acted with that knowledge and he helped further that plan. That was what was required for that conspiracy charge. But if you don't believe that, you might find him guilty on facilitation, which would be that he knew about that plan and he did something indirectly that could have helped, but he himself didn't directly help. Of course, we now know the jurors went with the first choice, the harshest of the charges, finding him guilty on that conspiracy. And like you said, Doug, the deliberations didn't take long. They were back at 2:53. They went on break at 12:30. So just over 2 hours, including their lunch break there, and they had their decision.
Okay, our live signal there from outside the courtroom dropping out for a moment. We'll of course be right back to Shay. So you heard the breakdown on the judge doing that. Is that a surprise to you? Have you seen it? Because that can sometimes be so complicated. The jurors are left going, well, wait a second.
Right.
I sat through here for 4 days thinking one thing, and now I've got to think of this.
Well, a lot of time that's called a lesser included. So again, that's usually requested by the defense and saying, look, if you don't, we don't think he was fully involved. We maybe think he facilitated this, which is obviously would be a lesser penalty range. A lot of times the prosecution will request it though, because A, they want to protect the record for appeal later if it wasn't given, and B, they want to make sure they get something on this. So, it really can depend, but it's not uncommon for judges to give lesser included, which is called lesser included offenses, based on the proof, the way the evidence came in.
And that may explain the juror who was dismissed that talked to Shay earlier, saying he thought one thing until he heard those, directions, and then, was kind of thinking the other way. So, and honestly, it seems like it kind of opens the door for a guilty verdict, really, but by the way she explained it there.
Yeah, and a lot of times though they're complicated, and I mean I'm not kidding when I say even as a lawyer, a lot of times I got to read them 4 or 5 times to break it down and go, okay, what are we asking here? What does it mean, and how does it fit the proof that came in?
Back to that juror's comments, which, by the way, we just ran for you. It's an exclusive interview that Jay got in that break. The judge let one of the alternates go, and we were able to catch up with him and walk with him. He said, once we were read the instructions, the way that the law reads kind of changes what we were trying to decide. So no, I don't have a clear opinion one way or the other on whether he is guilty. He asked whether they believe Lawson's story. That wasn't really the question of the case.
Right. It sounds like he didn't have any dispute about the facts. Maybe there was a question about how the law applied. And again, a lot of times those jury instructions are complicated, they're difficult, and you have to go through, there's definition, there's even they literally have definition sections for common words, because there is a definition you may believe, but you have to use the legal definition of even a simple word such as an assault, murder, attack, intent, things of that nature.
Well, let's get right back to Shay. Our live signal is back. And Shay, we've just been discussing the interview you did with the alternate juror as he was leaving the courtroom. Now you're able to match up what he said with reality. What do you think about what he said?
And I want to say something right off the bat about this, because a lot of questions after I did that interview of, is he supposed to talk? Is he allowed to talk? And we did find out, and I'm sorry, I'm watching the door because we're expecting people out here in a second, but that juror was given instructions that he could talk. Once he was dismissed from the case, the judge said, if any of you wish to talk to the media, you're more than welcome to do so. I ran downstairs and caught up with all three in the parking lot. Two of them declined, and we let them go, and this one said, sure, what are your questions? So one thing that was really interesting about him is he told me, and based on what he said, it sounds like he was really sticking to the rules. He was really wanting to make sure that he was not forming an opinion on this case until he was in the deliberation room with the other jurors, which is what he was instructed to do. So following the rules exactly as he should. He did tell me, like I told you guys, he changed his mind after he heard the jurors' instructions. But when I asked, do you think that he moved the car? He said, well, yeah, he admitted to moving the car. I said, well, do you think that he helped kill Crystal Rogers? He said, I don't know. We didn't hear anything on that. That wasn't the question for us. I asked, do you think he helped Brooks Houck with his plan to kill Crystal Rogers? And the juror there said, I'm not sure. That's something that they'll be talking about in the deliberation room. So he really was following the judge's instructions on not coming to a decision until the very, very end. If he did come to a decision, he did not fill me in on it.
Yeah, he kind of almost seemed a little bit like, he wasn't going to make a decision. Do you think that's because, he knew he wasn't going to be asked to step in at that point?
Well, and maybe he might have wanted to hear what all of the other jurors thought. He might have been interested in some of the other ideas, which is what they're supposed to do. Every single time they went on recess, the judge said, don't talk about this with each other. Don't talk about it with anyone until all of the evidence is in, you've heard closings, and then you go back and deliberate. That's the only time you should really be thinking this through. And it sounds like that was actually his plan, Connie. The courtroom doors are opening now, so I'm going to keep an eye out for who's passing by and see if anybody would like to make a comment to us as they leave the courtroom.
I'll tell you, anytime you need to break away, just let us know, Shay, as we're getting it here at 4:30. Can you reset for everybody, let them know what's going on now? Are we in the sentencing hearing phase right now?
It looks like we've just broke away for a moment here, Doug. Some of the Ballard family is coming out of the courtroom now in tears. Some of the supporters comforting each other after a really difficult week. You guys are completely fine to keep going. You're fine. If you're just now joining us, we have a verdict in the Steve Lawson case, guilty on both charges. He is now in the sentencing phase. His penalty will be decided, and the courtroom doors just opened moments ago where you're seeing some very emotional people walk out. A lot of people have been waiting a long time for a verdict in this case, for some sort of justice, some sort of closure. It'll be up to them to tell us if they found that here today, and perhaps they want to hear what happens at sentencing and what the final word is before they make that call. Isaiah Kim Martinez is here. Isaiah, if you want to come jump in. We're on with Connie and Doug. So you were in here just in the last few minutes with sentencing. If you want to fill them in, I told them about hearing from Tori and Barbara and what's happened since then.
Were you in there for any of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, you told them about sort of
Yes.
the emotions, obviously. I mean, Sherry Ballard's still in there, and she has two fists sort of leaned up against her face, and she's weeping. It is the emotions are heavy inside, and we actually just heard from attorneys on both sides here, both defense attorney Darren Wolf as well as prosecutor Shane Young, and they basically made their case to the jury. As far as sentencing is concerned, we know, Shay, that this is a 10 to 25 year possibility here. It could be as low as 10 years in prison and as much as 25 years. And the cases that both attorneys made, we had Darren Wolf, of course, Steve Lawson's attorney, make the case for pity. They asked the jury to take sympathy on Steve Lawson and give him the lowest possible sentence. And then we just heard from Shane Young, and he told them, I want to quote this here, he told the jury, give him every frickin' thing he deserves. Everything you can is what he told them. He said that for the family that lost a mother, a daughter, a sister, he basically told them, listen, this was his words. He said Steve Lawson stuck a knife in and twisted it for years. So these are strong words, again, from inside the courtroom. We just heard it. A lot of emotions in there. Family members are crying. It's a heavy moment. Verdict, even a guilty verdict for a family, a conviction, does not take anything away from the years of waiting. And you could really sense that in the courtroom. And of course, we also heard from Steve Lawson's mother as well. And she's trying to find a way to describe this moment as well. She, of course, is also asking for leniency here. And Shay, I don't know if there's more you want to touch on. I don't know how much of it you were in there for.
I snuck out there at the end, Isaiah, just because we could get out here and make sure everybody back here was hearing. And I threw on a mic as well, so you can keep that one. But when I walked out of the courtroom was when we had just heard from Barbara, Steve's mom. I followed her out. I actually asked her if she wanted to say anything, if she wanted to be a voice for Steve. She said, no, not at this time. She was just ready to get out of here, understandably so.
And there was a quote from her, and I'm paraphrasing here, I can go back in my notes, where essentially she said that she couldn't imagine that Steve would do something like this, and she was not condoning that behavior, despite everything that had happened. She almost said, I kind of told him, hey, why did you get involved? Why were you in the middle of this to begin with? So this was a mother who also said, she spoke to Sherry Ballard for a moment. She said, listen, if I was in your position, this is Steve Lawson's mother, I would have done the exact same thing.
A lot of sympathy for Sherry and for the whole family. Doug, Connie?
Well, Shay, I want to direct the question to you because you can hear, obviously, you've got the earpiece in. You know Sherry Ballard better than anybody. She's in that courtroom. I mean, you've been very close to her for years now. Tell me you know her so well. What is going through her mind? Is there any kind of relief yet, or does she know she's still got another big trial coming in a month?
Doug, just total speculation. I think it's got to be somewhere in the middle. Of course, if this had not gone her way, it would be so stressful waiting for several more weeks leading up to the trial for Brooks Houck. But at the same time, she still does have that one. She still has this massive hurdle up ahead in this journey for justice. We know that that is an important turn. I want to point out what you're seeing back there is the lead detective on this case, John Snow, hugging Sheriff Raymond Penaroa, hugging some of the people involved, wiping his own eyes. Detective John Snow was the lead investigator on this case for the first 5 years. He's the one who was searching the Houck family farm. He was the one who interviewed Brooks Houck first. He is intimately connected to this case, and you can see almost the relief and celebration for him because it was his investigation for 5 years, and so much of his evidence used today, including his testimony. He was one of the first on the stand at the beginning of this week, and he is hugging members of the Ballard family now. Everyone's saying, and I just heard him say, okay, one more to go. So a moment of a small celebration here because this is something that they've been waiting for, but it is only part of the puzzle here. Doug?
Well, I tell you what, Shay, you're right. And a lot of people who support the Ballard family have always say, as you know, I feel so badly for that family and what they've been through. And so I think you're right about Sherry Ballard. I mean, she has to have now new resolve going into next month, would you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that this gives her hopefully some confidence, some peace, some concept that we're moving in the right direction, that this is what she would hope would happen. She would hope there would be some accountability and some answers. So I think with all of that, they're going the right direction. At the same time, knowing Sherry, she's always been very conservative in not getting too excited, too hopeful at any time. She's felt let down for a lot of the last 10 years, and she's not willing, I don't think, to get overly excited and confident at the risk of being let down again.
Mm-hmm. That certainly makes sense because you're absolutely right. She's been let down so many times, and Shay, as someone who's covered this case longer than anyone for the last 10 years, talk about what surprised you the most out of this trial, out of this first part of this whole case.
I think the thing that stood out to me the most, the surprise for me the most, was just how much we heard about Nick Houck, Rosemary Houck, and just in general, this plan from Brooks Houck and this entire the scheme to all work together to kill Crystal. I think that there's so many pieces of this puzzle that we have never heard, that we've only ever been able to guess at, and we really got a lot of those answers. I will say, when it comes to Nick Houck, a lot of answers we do not have right now. A lot of questions about his involvement and how, if he is as deeply involved as we've heard throughout this week, how he still hasn't been arrested. Of course, Rick McCubbin, his former chief of police, telling us yesterday he made the right choice when he fired him 10 years ago. He had a feeling back then that he was connected, and so was Rosemary Houck. When I asked Rick, how is it possible that he hasn't been arrested, Rick said, I'm sure that this is part of the plan. You know, Shane Young, the prosecutor, it's his decision to bring an indictment. I'm sure that this is part of the plan, so we'll have to wait and see on that one.
You know, in listening to the testimony the past 4 days, Shay, was there ever any doubt that these are the verdicts that we would have here just at 4 o'clock today?
You know, I don't know, Doug. It's so hard to say. I tried to keep an open mind just because I didn't know. I didn't know what was going through their minds. I think that there was good cases made on sides. I know that even for the family, they were feeling confident at times and feeling less confident at times. So it fluctuated back and forth. Steve Lawson on the stand this morning did seem confident. He seemed very sure of himself in his story that all I did was move a car. I don't know whose car it was. I didn't care about the car. I didn't know what they were going to do about the car. I was just drinking and having fun, and I needed money, and this was a job, and I was going to move the car. So that was his story, and he seemed very confident in sharing it today. It obviously did not impact the jury to change their mind that no, he knew about a plan to kill Crystal Rogers, and he acted on it. That is what their conviction says today. And I know that we have, Isaiah's going to move over to his camera too, so that we can be in position to talk to anyone. Before you do, Isaiah, anything else you want to add?
How much did you go into Tory? I mean,
we talked through it pretty good. Yeah,
I think, you know, the question, and something that I think we should discuss too, is, you know, I covered a federal trial just early last year, or late last year, sorry, and there was a lot of sort of build-up to the judge reading the verdict from the jury foreperson. This was very quick. You had the judge basically read the charges, and you heard him say guilty, guilty. It almost happened before everyone was actually back in the courtroom. And it was almost like the moment you sort of waited and you're like, wow, this just happened. You could tell the family was sort of feeling the same thing. Everyone sort of bursted out into tears around the same time, but still trying to maintain themselves because the judge has said from the very beginning, no outbursts, right? So we, of course, just sort of heard that raw reaction. I think an interesting point here, too, is to see whether the jury will decide whether these potential sentences will run together concurrently or consecutively, right? That could sort of dictate how long Steve Lawson could spend in prison. We know it could be as much as 25 years. We know defense attorneys made a point to say, listen, if it's 25 years, how old is Steve Lawson going to be by the time that time comes, 60s, 70s, into the later part of his life? So again, really asking for leniency there. But the special prosecutor, Shane Young, telling the jury, look, don't have any mercy here. He knew what he was doing for years, and he did it anyway. I want to step out of the way as more people come out of the courtroom. We know several family members waited inside. I believe, Shay, that Sherry Ballard is still inside at this moment. I know that she was in no rush to get out. Very emotional inside. And obviously we wait for this process. This is just a recommendation, obviously. I believe the judge still has to make the final call here ultimately. It's interesting too, because of the last trial that I covered, the sentencing is in months. We still haven't gotten there yet, many months down the line. This is gonna be happening here fairly quickly. At least the families will know what the jury thinks, and then ultimately what the judge decides will be what happens here.
And Shay, if you don't mind asking Isaiah, since he can't hear us, could you ask him, when he talked about the defense asked the jury to take pity on Steve Lawson, what specifically he said to them why he deserves their pity?
So Isaiah, they have a question for you. When you mentioned
I don't have my earpiece
asking
in,
the defense asked the jury to take pity on Steve Lawson, exactly what did they mean?
So they were saying, and again reiterating, and this is actually a key point that defense attorney Darren Wolf said to the jury. He said the words, "I don't think any of you guys," these are his words, he says, "I don't think any of you guys think that Steve Lawson actually committed the murder. No one here thinks that," he said. He says, he actually said the words, "We're not even sure if there was a murder," he said. At the end of the day, he really tried to paint the picture that Steve Lawson was just caught up in all of this rather than being the one to facilitate this. And that was their biggest argument to the jury. Listen, this was not his plan from the start. He got caught up in it, and that is why that he should get the lesser end of the sentencing. They're asking for 10 years, which would be the minimum.
So Shay,
All right,
I've got
well,
a question.
I know we're waiting to see. Sure.
I want to pick back up with you on Steve Lawson, such a fascinating figure, because Nick Mudd sitting next to me, and he yesterday called it that Steve Lawson would probably be on the stand and the last guy to testify. So we don't know anything about him. Talk more about his demeanor. Was he likable? Was he confident? Was he considered smart to the jury? I mean, what were the initial gut reaction impressions of this man?
Sure. Let me set the scene for you a little bit as far as what I believe the scene that the defense was attempting to set for the jury. They asked him, first of all, what is your education level? His last grade in school was the 10th grade. He did not graduate high school. He asked, what's your relationship like with your son? It's very bad. They asked, did you have a problem with alcohol? Yes, I was an alcoholic for many, many years. When they asked about money, he said, I lived very paycheck to paycheck. I didn't have much. So they're setting up a scene that is really just a man who's making it paycheck to paycheck. He's working construction jobs. He's doing a lot of partying. That's who Steve Lawson was when this happened. They asked him, did you know Brooks Houck? How did you know Brooks Houck? He said he met Brooks Houck through his son Joey, who did work for him, and he was just another employer to Steve Lawson. They didn't spend any time together besides working on jobs. And their relationship was interesting too, because even though he only knew him working on jobs, he talked about how he messed up a job once. He was cutting grass, moving grass, and he went into another property, and how Brooks got very angry with him. And Steve actually said that he was yelling at him. Brooks was yelling at Steve in front of Crystal and Eli, and he had to tell him, if you're going to holler and scream at me, don't do it around that baby. So Steve there, setting the expectations that he was calming Brooks down in a stressful moment like that. When they asked about that 4th of July weekend, 2015, why were you with Brooks Houck? What was going on there? He said, I really wasn't with Brooks Houck. I was with my son Joey, that friend Charlie who testified yesterday. They talked about moving a car. Brooks said, will you move the car? He said yes, and he did it. And he tried to leave it at that. So the entire time Steve Lawson was on the stand, he was really just trying to set a scene that was very, very little knowledge of Brooks Houck, very little involvement with Brooks Houck. He was trying to help his son. He moved this car, he picked up his son, and he loved his son despite not getting along with him. That's really the feeling we got during that time. Doug?
Shay, do you think, though, some statements that he made certainly maybe had the jury thinking he was guilty? Like when he said that he moved the seat back in the car, when he made statements that he didn't know who killed Crystal Rogers, or if she was even dead. Do you think statements like that emotionally affect the jury?
It's a good question. When I was watching the jury, and I watched them all throughout, I saw little reaction from them during his testimony today. Very little reaction. I saw reaction when Sherry was on the stand. You could tell there was a lot of compassion and empathy for Sherry. When Tori, Crystal's daughter, was on the stand here just a few minutes ago in the sentencing phase, you could tell that there was, the one woman, a juror, was wiping tears out of her eyes. So that emotion was there then. I don't know that Steve was resonating with them because I didn't see that. And when I asked the juror who got dismissed as we were walking, what do you think about this? What do you think of Steve Lawson? And he just kind of said, he didn't have any thoughts on him. Could have been, like we've been saying this whole time, he was trying to not have too many opinions. He wasn't supposed to have opinions until the end. But yeah, he certainly was not telling me anything that he thought about that.
So as we're getting close to 5 o'clock, Shay, why don't we give folks another update of where we stand? Could we actually hear the sentence today? Are we in a holding pattern for that? If that's what's going on right now?
So right now we're waiting outside of the courtroom. We know that Stephen Lawson has been found guilty on both charges, conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. And as you can see, they're heading back into the courtroom now. I'm going to stay out with you, but Isaiah, I'll take that, Isaiah, so that I can grab anyone we might need. Thank you. So Isaiah is going to head back into the courtroom to hear what the jury actually came up with as far as that sentencing goes. We'll stay with you out here. You're seeing a mixture of members of the media and members of Crystal Rogers' family filing back in here. There's a lot of people here paying attention, a lot of people who really care about what comes next. What's on the line is as little as 10 years in prison, as many as 25 years in prison, and ultimately it is up to this jury. They're the ones who get to decide what the penalty is for Steve Lawson. When we were hearing testimony on the sentencing phase, we heard from Crystal's daughter, from Steve's mom. I saw Darren Wolf, Steve's attorney, lean over to him and ask him, "Are you interested in talking? Do you want to talk?" And he just shook his head. Steve looked a little bit defeated. He might have been feeling a little bit more confident this morning when he decided to get on the stand. I'm certainly not feeling that way now. But you can see our final few here walking into the room, Doug and Connie. Once those doors close, the jury will come back in, they'll deliver their sentence, and this trial will be complete. We had heard that it could be as short as a week. It seems now that that's the case.
Real quickly, I want to ask Nick Mudd, do you think he gets the 25 years?
It's tough to say, and it depends on how well the jury believed him. Even they could still convict someone and feel bad for them and say, well, you got kind of roped into this by Brooks Halleck, and maybe only give him 10. The complete opposite could happen too. We think you're a liar, despicable, this is horrible, and they give him 25. So it's really tough to say. As Shay said, the jurors didn't have much reaction when they were watching him, so they remained pretty stoic. So it's going to be difficult to say what they're going to give him, but we're ultimately going to see her shortly.
It certainly sounds like the testimony given for the sentencing phase may have really pulled on their heartstrings, especially with the daughter.
Right, and you know, it's that kind of stuff can affect people, but again, you never know, right? He's a human being, and people could take pity on him and feel bad for the situation.
You see your own children, you see the best in your children, that kind of thing.
Right.
Trying to connect here.
Absolutely.
But then again, Steve Lawson's testimony did him no good.
And you know, but he had to throw the Hail Mary. He was down and out, and had one more shot. And I think though, Shane Young's words though there at the end were, you know, give him every day he's earned essentially is pretty tough.
And again, the jury goes back to thinking about all this time that he could have said something and did not.
Excuse me, again, cameras not allowed in this courtroom. If you're just tuning in, we got the verdict right at 4 o'clock as we went on the air to tell it to you first here on WHAS 11 News. Guilty on both of the charges, conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. So now, Nick, let's talk for a few minutes as we're getting set for the next trial starting Tuesday, June 24th, also in Bowling Green.
Right.
Most likely, no cameras allowed in the courtroom, and this is going to be Joseph Lawson, Steve's son, and Brooks Halleck, of course, charged with murder. Any way this trial goes as fast for the next two?
Absolutely not. There's no way. I think we're going to hear from several more witnesses. Certainly, you now have 2 separate lawyers cross-examining. So you have the prosecutor calling, questioning, then you have one lawyer go, then another lawyer. And, you know, the lawyers representing the younger Lawson and Mr. Halleck are both fantastic lawyers as well, and I assume they're going to be extremely thorough in that trial. And they will have the benefit of sworn testimony already to try to trip up some of these witnesses.
And we saw that the defense attorneys for Brooks Halleck were at this trial listening in. Is that pretty common?
It is, and I mean, rarely though as a defense lawyer do you get to see what's going to happen. Well, you know, kind of get a foreshadowing of what you're going to get from witnesses in your own trial. So I think it's a significant advantage going second.
Now, Steve Lawson's attorney going into this said, hey, I haven't had enough time. I'm sort of new to this case to, 400,000 pages of documents and the numbers we have heard. But Brian Butler on the other side with Brooks Houck, he's got to be the most well-versed of all the attorneys getting ready to try the next trial, right?
He has been in it since day one. And, I know Brian personally, and I can tell you, it has consumed him. It is pretty much all he's worked on since this case has started.
How much does it help that he worked in the prosecutor's office as well a long time ago, but he's been a defense attorney for a long time, but just how does that help going into a case like this, a murder case?
Brian was an excellent Commonwealth's attorney here, assistant Commonwealth's attorney. He also was an assistant U.S. attorney.
Right.
So he's seen it all in terms of prosecution. But having that experience, I worked over there before, where the first office he worked, and it gives you that kind of precursor of what the prosecutor is going for. So you know what they're going to present, you know how they're going to present it, and you know why they're going to present it, and it gives you an idea of, okay, what do they not want to see? And that's the angle you want to go, of what the prosecutor doesn't want the jury to hear. You want to pull that stuff out.
We had an interview in Alexandra Goldberg's story, who is in Bardstown. She went and talked to folks in Bardstown that I thought really summed up the last 10 years. The man said this week has been quite interesting. I mean, things were popping up left, right, and crooked.
Right.
I mean, that's what we've lived through for 10 years. And we didn't see Sherry Ballard come out of the courtroom. She's sitting there waiting for the sentencing. She wants to hear what's going on. It's hard for me to assign any relief that she could have right now. I mean, I'm glad, she's probably glad to see the legal justice system finally going this way, but she's having to listen to very detailed information about what happened to her daughter.
Absolutely, and it's tough when I was a prosecutor, I told family members, you don't have to sit through everything. A lot of times you're torturing yourself. It's hard, and you don't know what a jury's going to do. And so, I'm sure our heart goes out to her. It's a very difficult process for her, and certainly a difficult day. But even worse for her, it's not over yet. There's still another trial to go, to where she's going to have to relive a lot of that same witness testimony, plus probably substantially more.
But of course, after 10 years of not having answers, to get to sit in there and listen to what everybody is saying on the stand, there's no closure for her. She lost her daughter and her husband.
Right.
And raising those grandchildren. So she's had a lot on her plate. But to get those answers, that's got to help a little bit.
I would hope so, but it's still, I assume she's still holding her breath till it's all over, come either late June or early July. We don't know how long that next trial will take.
So the jury deliberated very fast, from 12:30 p.m. to 2:53 p.m. They didn't waste any time, basically right after or during their lunch. That says to you, as a guy who's probably rolled the dice trying to predict juries going into the deliberations, what does it lay out for you there?
The 2-hour mark is kind of the telling mark, okay? That's what we always kind of gamble around as defense and prosecution. When we all hang out after trials together and we'll talk, that 2-hour mark is are we going to be here all night, or is it going to come back quick? And usually, though, if it's really quick, it's usually a not guilty, but if it's at 2 hours, it's typically a guilty. So when you called me and said there was a verdict and I knew it was around that mark, I thought they're going to come back with a guilty verdict.
Okay. Does that surprise you just how quickly he went through those instructions?
I think the judge usually goes through them once, gives to the jury, but I think the jury obviously looked at the evidence and, they talked about it for probably an hour and a half, applied it to the law, and, it sounds like they were given the 2-hour mark and they were having lunch. I mean, they had their mind made up.
Yeah.
All right, a lot more analysis is coming up from Nick Mudd. Don't go anywhere. Here's what's straight ahead for you coming up in just a minute. WHAS 11 News at 5. We're going to be joining our reporters there who are in Bowling Green getting reaction as the sentencing phase is now underway. We're going to learn the sentencing for Steve Lawson coming up momentarily. And then at 9:30, once again, as we've done all the week, our special report coverage on the free WHAS 11 Plus app. This is going to be a breakdown of today's verdict, guilty on all counts for Steve Lawson. I'll be here along with Shay and Isaiah Kim Martinez and Nick Mudd as we're going to break down the end of this day as we head into the weekend and get ready for trial number 2. That's tonight at 9:30. Download the free WHAS 11 Plus app. That's how you watch it. Download for free and then watch.